Hello there, get yourself comfortable and let me tell you a story. It begins with a project motivation, which stemmed from a previous semester project, where we explored the effect of using triggers to determine the location for events in open world storytelling, and found that those who had a guiding arrow shoved in their faces tended to remember less of the story and felt less of a desire to continue. From this we researched memorability and picked two memory types: episodic, which is how we remember our own experiences, and spatial, which is how we remember locations and relationships between them. This was then linked to engagement, in that positive and negative stimulus can have an effect on how we remember the experience in question. We then looked at different wayfinding types and decided to use marked path, that is, players have a guiding line to their objective, and environmental guidance, which uses cues from the environment to guide the player. Finally, we looked at who would be the user for an eventual product and decided to separate these into player types to see if there were any difference between them. From all of this, a final problem statement or research question was devised which said, how is the player's episodic and spatial memory in a virtual environment affected by using marked path or environmental guidance, and how does the player's level of engagement affect this in the two conditions? Based on this, a list of requirements were created and used to develop a methodology designed to answer the final problem statement, which was first condensed into the following hypothesis and null hypothesis. H1. There is a difference in episodic and or spatial memory between the two wayfinding conditions. And H0. There is no difference in episodic or spatial memory between the two wayfinding conditions. In order to test this, we decided to evaluate episodic memory based on three factors. The first being a what, where, when test that checked if they remembered what objects were in the scene, where and when they were placed. The second being unexpected questions, which looked at how well they remembered details such as the amount or color of a specific object in a room. And the third being how well they could retell the narrative based on the objects present in the virtual scene. Spatial memory was evaluated based on room re-entries and the where part from the VVV test, since this would show if they had sufficient access to spatial information to avoid revisiting already explored areas. Finally, player engagement was evaluated as continuation desire and positive versus negative stimulus. Knowing how we would evaluate the effect of a manipulation, we decided on a two-conditional between groups test, where users would first play through a small game, then answer survey questions specifically designed to evaluate each area. This game was then designed with attention to narrative and level design to ensure both guiding conditions were viable, and then tested on 4 convenient sampled volunteers to get some feedback which we used to optimize the game and survey for the final test. This test was a bit special in the regard that it became fully automated, since the 24 volunteers were sampled via our online networks and then given a condition number from us and a corresponding readme, which became their only point of contact. These responses were then analyzed and visualized depending on the data type. Based on these results, we derived a list of main points in order to conclude and answer a final problem statement, which became that. Based on our results, we can see clear indications that engagement, narrative, and episodic memory were found to be lower when guided by a marked path compared to finding your way based on environmental cues and spatial knowledge. However, the degree of increase cannot be accurately determined due to the multitude of techniques used to evaluate the different parts, and that some of the results have a lower reliability due in part to the low sample size.